How's it going, everybody? My name is Sean Robinson with Panasonic Lumix USA, and today I figured I'd create a short little video here explaining some of the cool features that the Panasonic Lumix line of cameras offer that may help, kind of make this time while we're sitting here in self-isolation, or we're supposed to be, a little bit easier. We have a lot of time on our hands now, so why not use that time to learn some new features, learn a new discipline in photography or even in videography that may bring you some new experiences or new way to get your creativity out. And one of those features that I love, love, love about all of our cameras is the fact that we have a built-in intervalometer in every single one of our cameras, all the way down from our ZS80, the entry-level point and shoots, up to the S1H, our flagship, Netflix approved mirrorless cameras. So I figure what we'll do here is, I'll use my S1R here, which is my kind of go-to time-lapse photography camera for the moment. And we'll jump into the menus, take a look at, what each of these kind of options mean, where to find them in this case, and then just kind of show you a basic setup with utilizing one of my favorite apps, PhotoPills, on how to actually do all the calculations that you need for how many shots you need, how long of a period do you want to record, and most importantly, how long of a video do you want to produce. So with that, let's jump into the camera and cover some of that menu that I was talking about. Okay, so here we are with the Lumix S1R. Like I said, one of my favorite time-lapse photography cameras at the moment. And when you're working with a camera like this, specifically from our range, there's one main thing you want to set up first to get yourself ready to do time-lapse photography. And that's if you look underneath the collar of the mode dial here, this is where your drive modes are for the camera. So if I slide this one over to the second to last one here, you'll see that the back of the camera changes to now show some time-lapse information. Now, we've made it super simple once you have the camera set up to actually start manipulating this information. So setting the camera up how you want to actually have it record. So what you'll do is you'll push menu, and then automatically it's going to bring you right to the time-lapse menu option here. If you don't have it there, what you can do is it's under the main camera settings here, and then under the last others in the photo mode, page 2, and time-lapse animation. So from here, this gives you the mode. So if you want to shoot time-lapse or stop motion, because our cameras do also offer a stop motion function. So in this case, we're going to set it to time-lapse. You have shooting interval settings on or off. So this is whether or not you want to have it actually on or have it off. You have your start time, which for most of the time, you're probably going to have this set to now, which means the second you press the shutter button, it's actually going to start recording your time-lapse function. Or as long as you have your time set up in the camera properly, you can have it set to start, say, 2 hours from now or an hour from now. So if you're trying to capture, say, dusk to dawn, and you want to set the camera up before you go to bed that night, you can have it set up so that it wakes up, starts recording at a certain time, runs its course in what you've set up, and then you don't really have to worry about the camera. In a case like that, you definitely want to make sure that you have the camera powered. This way you don't, if for some reason you forget a battery or something like that, you've got everything all set up and you don't miss that sunrise there. So I'm going to have this set to now. The next one you have here is the image count. So if I go back here, you have image count, shooting interval. So if I tap on the screen there, this lets you put in how many pictures do you want to capture. So how many individual images do you want to shoot? And at what interval do you want those pictures taken? So you have everywhere up from 9,999 images if you wanted to capture that many. And in your shooting interval, you have pretty much as much time as you want between shots. So this works well if you're doing, say, a month-long time-lapse and you're going to have the camera set up. Or in this case, if you say you just want to mess around, you want to do a day, you can set it up for a proper interval between shots based on what your output is going to be lengthwise. So in this case, I have just a simple one set up here, 5,000 images at 3 seconds apart. And the cool thing with our cameras is, again, as long as your clock is set in the camera properly, down on the bottom here, it'll tell you when your time lapse is going to end. So you'll know if you're targeting a certain time that you want the actual capture to end, you'll have a really good point of when it's going to end down here, so you know that you've got your planning all set, ready to go. Once you have that, you just tap set. Now on the S series of cameras, and this is something that's only in these cameras, it's not in the LX or the GX or G series cameras, those other options that we offer, you also have now exposure leveling. So what this will do is say, if I'm in aperture priority, which typically I'll shoot time lapses in, this will make sure that the individual exposure variance between every shot is leveled out, so you don't get that flickering that can happen. And a lot of times that's just due to the fact that since modern lenses and cameras are electronically controlled apertures, they may not stop down to the identical same spot every single time it takes a picture. It may be, just so slightly off with the proper exposure settings that you get that kind of flicker in an image. So once you have all of that set up, you can half press the shutter button and that returns back to the main screen. And from here, on the bottom, you'll have a little indicator here with the time-lapse icon that shows you that you're going to be taking 5,000 pictures and you're going to have the intervals all set up. So from there, you just press the shutter and it'll focus, grab that shot, and go off and just start capturing at that period. Now, one thing that I do also want to remember to mention is that typically with time-lapse, never use autofocus. When you use autofocus, you run the risk of the camera, obviously something coming in front of the frame that you're shooting, that becomes incredibly jarring in that end video that you record. So when you flip it to manual focus, especially like with our cameras where we have the focus collar that we can just pull back, dial in our focus with focus peaking, make sure that I'm there, it gives me that just guarantee that that's where my focus is. And if you're using, like on our cameras, if you're using the distance scale on the bottom here, it'll even give you a rough idea of what your depth of field is, so what range you're going to be okay to focus in, accounting for the 1/3, 2/3 rule there. So it ends up giving you every tool that you need to make sure that what you're focusing on, where you want to have this thing set up, especially because with time-lapse you don't want to touch the camera, you don't want to interact at all with it, create any kind of bump or shake in the image. It just does everything for you. So like I said, once you have that, push the shutter button and you just let it go and it's all set, hands off at that point. So say you have one of our point and shoot cameras, so ZS80, FZ1000, in this case I have an LX100 Mark II with me, which is my go-to travel camera when I just want something and I don't want to take out my mirrorless cameras. These cameras also have the time-lapse capability. Now it's a little different to get into it because you don't have that mode dial and it's not under the drive modes that the cameras normally offer. So there's a little bit more menu diving in this system. So what we'll do is press the menu button. You'll go to the main camera settings, and then on page 3 of 4, in this case, particularly with the LX100 Mark II, it's down on page 3 of 4. In your camera, you would just look through the menu here to where you see time-lapse shot. Once you tap on that and go into this menu, you have pretty much every single one of the same settings here, minus that interval, the leveling function. So without the leveling function, you want to be a little more cautious with what you're shooting. You may have to work with the file in post to kind of get out some of that flicker, but it still works identically as far as the actual capture. So when you tap, in this case, drop down, go into the shooting interval, same setup. You have up to 9,999 images that you can shoot. You have pretty much an unlimited amount of time between images that you want to capture. And it'll still also give you that time when it's going to be done. So once you're all set, again, you do, in this case, it's a little different than the S series or even some of the G series cameras that have it on a main dial. You're going to want to make sure that you go to Start and press Menu Set. Now you'll get the little indication here that says press shutter to start. Once you press the shutter button, in this case, because I only set one, it says time-lapse shot complete. Now it'll just run, it'll just continue to do that set of images that you programmed into it, and you're good to go. Now the last camera that I want to show this to you on is one of our G series cameras. This is our GX9, you can tell because of the tilting EVF here. And again, it has the same functionality that the other systems have as well. You still have all that time-lapse functionality, you have the stop motion capability, and this is more in line with how you'd get into it from one of our point and shoot cameras. So in this case, again, click on the menu, go to the camera settings menu here, and on the GX9, it's going to be on page 4 of 4, time-lapse shot, go into that, and it's the same exact menu as the LX. So again, shooting interval, start time, image count, change it up how you want, tells you that time again. Come out of here, and just like the point and shoot series, you want to make sure that when you're in this, you highlight start, press the menu set, you get that notice again that says press shutter to start. Once you press the shutter, then it captures. And you'll see a little bit of a difference on the screen-wise from all three of these cameras here. In most cases, you'll have some sort of quick option up here, which will let you go in and alter your settings here. If you're in the middle of the time lapse and say you've got it started and you want to pause it or you want to stop it early, you can tap this little icon that comes up right here, which is the time lapse icon with the remaining shot count there. When you tap that, it'll say, do you want to end the shot? You can click yes. And then it'll give you a couple more menu options there so that you can actually then create the time-lapse in camera. So one of the most useful tools that you can have when you're doing time-lapse photography is, in my opinion, this app called Photo Pills. And the coolest thing about this is that, like we were saying originally, there's a lot of calculations involved to figure out what number count of images you want to capture, what the interval should be, especially when you're looking at, do you want to do a full day time-lapse, week-long time lapse. There's a ton of information you need to think about. Now, originally, we had to do this stuff on pen and paper or in our head, figure out what the interval would be based on the frame rate, and it takes a lot of prep time. So luckily, these guys have created a pocket tool for not just time lapse, but pretty much any kind of photography you can think of that makes it super easy to just plug in a couple bits of information so that you're prepared, ready to go, and you know what to input on the camera for your video. So once you open the app, you're greeted like this, and what we'll do is we'll slide all the way down here and you'll see you have the time-lapse option. So when you tap on time-lapse option, you get a little bit of information here. So the first one to the left is the clip length. So this is how long of a video do you want to create. In my case here, because a lot of times I put these things up on Instagram, I just have a 1 minute clip length. So when I tap OK, it already starts to calculate this information out. The next one over here is the event duration. So say I want to do a 24-hour long time lapse, so one full day. I can either do it 24-hour or just come up and change it to 1 day. When I click OK, now I have a 1 minute clip, the duration's 1 day, and then I have these two other options here. So I can go in and the frame per second. So what is the output frame per second that I'm shooting for? In this case, I'm outputting at 24 frames per second, which if you're comfortable with video or you understand a little bit more than just the basics, you'll know that 24p video is actually 2398. It's really 23976. So you can punch that information in so that it's proper if you're trying to mix this in with an actual 24p video. And you know that you're not going to have some weird frame mismatch when you're plugging it into your content. So for here, 2398, set OK. And you'll see that right now it's recommending that my shooting interval should be 1 minute and the number of photos should be 1,439 frames. But also, if you know what the file size is of each of the images from your camera, you can also plug that in over here. So image size, 64 megabyte, 10 megabyte, whatever it is, depending on the image that you're capturing. And you can find this by looking at either in File Explorer or Finder, depending on which operating system you're on, to kind of plan out your storage space. Because the other thing that you have to be aware of is how much storage do you need to actually capture these images. So in this case, I put 64 megabytes, I hit OK, and it's telling me that this time lapse is going to take up 89.94 gigs of space. So I need to make sure that I have a memory card large enough to actually take all of this. So now that you have all of this, then you can actually go in, plug the information into your camera, which we'll show you now. we're going to use this as an example here. This is 10 pictures at 3 seconds for your interval, and I'm doing this on the LX100 Mark II. So say I want to have this thing set up, and ideally you'd have this on a tripod. You wouldn't do this handheld unless you're going to try to do hyperlapse, but that's a whole nother style of time-lapse photography. So what I would do here is just tap the shutter button, and it's going to capture here. So it's doing one picture every 3 seconds for, in this case, a count of 10 images. And what you'll see is this is exactly why you don't have autofocus turned on. Because if I have this thing sitting here pointing at the Lumix on there, but then I have something, say, come in a little bit more off, the camera's going to try to refocus and grab, say, that wall back there instead of the camera. And I can keep doing this, run it through. But once the actual image setup is done, what you'll see is that you get a new option here called Create Video Now. So what you have the option to do is press yes, in this case, and it gives you a new menu option. So you can do your record quality, you can output 4K 30p in this case, 24p in 4K, 60p in 1080, 30p in 1080, or also 30p in 720p video. So depending on what output you want to have it for, where you want to have it displayed, gives you tons of those options. So in this case, say I want to do a 60p full HD simple video. I can then click frame rate and adjust what the playback frame rate is. So if it's 1 frame every second in that 60p timeline, or 60p in that 60p timeline. Typically for your first one, just leave it at 60 or 24 or 30, whichever of the frame rates that you're picking for your output video. And then you also have that capability here of running it in normal, which is the time frame that you captured it in, so from image 1 through the last image. Or you can do it in reverse, in which case it will play and create the video backwards. So I always joke in my classes about, that if you've caught that sunrise and you want to make it a sunset, just flip it or backwards and see who catches it. You'd be surprised how many people don't actually catch that. So for here, I can just do normal, and once you're set there, go up to OK, press OK, and then it'll say it's going to take 1 minute to process this, click yes, and then it runs through. Now this will be super fast because it's only 10 pictures for 3 seconds each, so it's going to process really, really fast. I've done some in camera with the S1R that 5,000 image at 3 seconds apart, that had taken about an hour in camera to process. But what's cool is that all of our cameras will do this. They'll process that footage into a time lapse in camera so that you're all ready to go. And ideally, if you're going to be working with these cameras and you want to make a time lapse to where you want to output 16:9, like all of our cameras, you can select that 16:9 aspect ratio and just record it that way so it's already in the right crop. But if you're going to bring this into software in post, which I typically try not to do, I try to keep it as straightforward as possible, you can still record it in the full sensor width and height that you normally would. So full frame 35mm here, 4/3 here utilizing the multi-aspect sensor, or in the 4/3 sensor in our GX or in the other G series cameras. This way, when you put it into software like Final Cut or After Effects or Premiere or something like that, you can then crop and shift that image up and down, just like you would do with a normal video. So that pretty much covers all of my favorite things about our time-lapse capabilities, and the fact that you can do this across any single camera in our line. And it makes it super, super simple to expand into a world of image making that you may have not experienced before, or may not even really have ever thought about. So I hope that you guys take this video and go out there and try some new experiences with your photography and videography. I'd love to see them. Make sure you post them up. You can tag me if you're on Facebook. My account is Sean@Lumix, so that's SEAN space AT space LUMIX. And I'd love to see what you guys get. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.